Okay, and we will give it just another minute as we allow a few more attendees to join. We have Ann McCabe on the line too, Mike.
Oh, how cool. Hello, Ann.
Well, hi, Ann, and hi, Marsha. Thank you both for joining us. And we are seeing more people coming on in. Great. Wonderful. Okay. Thank you everybody so much for joining us today. I'm going to give it just one more minute as we allow a couple more folks to filter on in for what is our last virtual session of the year.
Mm-hmm.
We've done some sessions. We've done some sessions, and I'm pretty excited for this one because I feel like I can't go very far onto the news without seeing some security breach, security hack, issues here, be careful here. You know, we have personally set up so many different monitoring systems to try to keep track of everything. So I think thank goodness we have people like Alexandria and Aaron and Marsha and team to guide us through. Lord knows we're fumbling in the dark.
Great way to bring in the holiday season.
That's it, with security. Love it. Okay, all right. Well, thank you everybody so much for joining us today. My name is Kalia Garrido and I head up marketing and events here at Great Data Minds. We are thankful that you have decided to join our session. If you don't know us yet, Great Data Minds is a collective of passionate data activists, and we are on a mission to modernize the world of data. We do this in two different ways. The first is that we have our services arm at greatdatamindsinnovationlabs.com. This is where we do our strategic planning, education, and the deployment of critical data projects. Then over on the greatdataminds.com, the GDM side of the house, this is where we create content and host great events, just like the one that we're doing today. We invite transformational thought leaders to join us on the line and share some of their expertise. And so that's what we're going to get into today. A little bit of housekeeping before we get things kicked off. This is a webinar, of course, so your cameras and microphones are off to all the attendees, but we do welcome live conversation. You can do this in a couple ways. You can do it through the chat. You can use the Q&A, which will send a question directly to me, or if you prefer to wait until the end of the session for a more formal Q&A time, we'll hold some space for that as well. And so today I am very excited to host this amazing conversation, and I will start by introducing our guests. So we have Alexandria Leary. Alexandria is a cloud technology and information security enthusiast. She has a Master of Science in Information Systems, and she excels in translating tech talk. Tech talk, yeah, that sounded weird when I said it. That's why we have Alexandria to do it. And then we also have Aaron Rea. Aaron is a principal cloud security consultant at ScaleSec, and he has degrees in computer science and physics from Texas Lutheran University. And both Alex and Aaron hold a myriad of professional technical certifications from Google and AWS and more. So these are the right people to talk to today. But before we begin, of course, our very own, like Santa, a young Santa in the making, is Mr. Mike Lampa. He is our Chief Analytics Officer here at Great Data Minds. Mike is a true transformation agent. He works with enterprises to modernize their analytics programs from the ground up. He's got a ton of experience as an executive analytics practitioner, both as a consultant and as an employee in Global 100 enterprises. That's the end of my rant. Mike, thank you so much for dressing up today.
You're very welcome.
I'm feeling this. I'm feeling the season. We have a light snow happening outside of Denver, Colorado today. So this is all very, very well put together.
According to the forecast, that light snow may turn into a blizzard, huh?
Yeah. I know, right?
Well, thank you, Kalia and Alexandria and Aaron. Welcome. So great to see you again today. And happy holidays to everybody. This is our final session, and we thought it'd be a nice one to bring the holiday season into full swing. So thank you for joining us. So Alexandria and Aaron, let's talk security. My understanding is you have some 5 core tenets around securing our cloud data warehouse ecosystem. Let's get into talking about those if we may. Huh?
Sounds good. I can go ahead and start, and I will start with just the first one that I believe that everyone should start with when building anything in the cloud, and that is to not forget the security basics. So in this case, that counts for things like IAM, making sure that you have roles for folks and that the access that they are using is only what they require, that there is not anything additional or above and beyond what they should have access to that is in there. Encryption of anything that you can encrypt is usually a good choice. Firewalls are also a top one to make sure that the network is more secure as well. Composing your data architecture from simple and secure primitives like that is the best way to start with a secure base level, and then you can continue to build from there.
You know,
Aaron, do you have anything to add? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to offer up just a commentary around the firewall thing. Many companies are trying to figure out how to tap into their censored products and services, which typically, especially if you're in a manufacturing capacity, that's a double firewall hurdle to get through in order to bring that sensor data back to the cloud. So I appreciate you mentioning the firewall configuration aspects.
I think the one thing I'd like to add in not forgetting the basics is also not forgetting simplicity of the basics. Everyone, I think, in a lot of cases, sees the complexity of the cloud and thinks, "Wow, that's something that we're that's too complex to handle." When in reality, if you stick to the fundamentals, you stick to the basics, and you try and keep them simple, you'll come out successful and secure on the other end.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we got the security basics nailed down, but we're talking about data. So we're talking about data warehouses and data lakes and lake houses and giving ubiquitous access to our end user information stakeholders and whatnot. Can we talk a little bit about what we need to focus on when we, utter the phrase "lock down your data"?
Yeah. So I can start again, and then I'll have Aaron kind of take over if I miss anything or if he has anything to add. One of the things to keep in mind as far as locking down your data is kind of back to the IAM statement that I made earlier. Not everyone needs to see everything. Not everyone needs to know everything. So if there's sensitive data in the data that you have, it's a good idea to either tokenize it or hide it in some way if possible. If you don't need it, then it's even better to just get rid of it. That will prevent any, accidental data leaks of PII or PHI, depending on what you have in your warehouse. One of the other things that, as far as kind of what your data looks like, is keeping in mind where your data should be. There are certain rules and regulations that have come out, like GDPR, that kind of prevent you from having certain data in certain locations and making sure that it is in one regional area. And so making sure that you know where your data is, what's inside of it, and how you're going to use it, I think is a great place to start as far as keeping it secure.
And to just build off that, to take another angle from the location of the data and where it's stored, aside from any kind of regulatory and compliance considerations, also think a little bit about where it's actually residing in the cloud. Are we storing data sets on compute instances in S3 buckets? If you're on AWS, is it living in some managed service? All these things are important to consider when you go to track the lineage and your attack surface in terms of where, how, and when data might be breached. In security, we like to think of this concept of blast radius. How impactful would the action of putting a data set on an EC2 instance potentially be if you're doing snapshots or backups of the instance, or if potentially that instance is exposed to the internet and an attacker breaches that via SSH or the web server? What kind of exposure could you see there? So it's always important to take that into consideration when you're evaluating different services or different architectures for your data pipelines.
And you mentioned around, making data available to the people on a need-to-know basis. There's an implication there. We have to be careful as data professionals, I believe. And I'm looking for your input as you've interacted with many organizations throughout your services. The integration of row-level security is an important thing, so that as I authenticate myself, I should only see the rows of data that are available to me. But I'm also seeing more and more clients going to role-based access control, or even attribute-based access and cell-based access controls. As you're consulting with organizations from a security standpoint, how often do you have to get involved with the data architecture groups to advise them?
Well, it's often pretty fundamental to the efforts that we're involved in. In a lot of cases, there's either a misunderstanding or a lack of knowledge in how to actually implement some of those features in certain cloud services. Role-based, obviously, going back to point one, IAM is probably what you need to be spending 80 to 90% of your time on in the cloud, and then everything else. Once you get IAM lined out and your network access, obviously. Everything else is just kind of, plugging in the Legos, so to speak. So a lot of times in our engagements, it's a matter of understanding the problem that the data engineer or other engineers are trying to solve, and mapping those needs to the different types of controls, IAM, firewall, encryption, as they fit properly.
Yeah. So many times I see companies that you have a deer in the headlights. Look to them as like, well, wait a minute, how do I implement access controls where I only want people to see certain sets of data? It's like, well, there's a data model implication there. Yeah, great. All right, so keeping it simple, focusing first on the basics. Make sure we understand how to lock down the data, not only proximity and where it is, but then those access controls in, which of course integrates it has an integration point with the data models themselves. What's our next thing that we need to be focusing in on?
Well, Mike, if I could just step back to locking the data down, I think one thing that that's often forgotten is the fact that the data is there even if we're not using it anymore, right? And obviously there's cost implications to that, but from a security perspective, there's risk involved in maintaining data that you're not actually going to use. So it's really important to keep everything, to classify everything, and consider how long it actually needs to live in your cloud, in your environment, to be accessed and get the value out of it. And then once you're done with it, don't leave it up there, right? These aren't servers that are locked behind your cabinets. These are up in the cloud, and you never know what's going to come next in terms of breaches or unauthorized access. So age your data out. When you're done with it, just go ahead and remove it. And on top of that, you'll save the storage cost.
Oh gosh, I love that you brought that up, Aaron, because we're constantly trying to help our customers understand that data is a product. We're building a product through software, right? And data pipeline software and whatnot. And because it's a product, it has a life cycle, which means there's an end of cycle period there. And we have to be really, really cognizant of that. It's so easy to forget about the fact that I've got this obsolete or dormant data that's sitting around, and it's insidiously turning into a liability. Mm-hmm. All right. So lock your data down, but don't forget about it. Okay, so let's...
Don't throw away the key.
Don't throw away the key. Where's the key to my sled? We're locking our data now. What's our next part now around security standpoint?
Once you've got the fundamentals, once you've got your fundamentals there, your security fundamentals, and you really know what you have and how you're using it, it's time to start looking at what resources and services are actually available to you. And a lot of cases in AWS, if anyone was paying attention to the reInvent announcements last week, there's a whole lot. There's a number of new services that focus on not only managing and analyzing data and data streams, but also observing that infrastructure and maintaining it in a performant way. So what I would say is focus on the fundamental tools that you're using. So if it's a Macy or a data loss prevention tool, in AWS, your Redshifts or big queries if you're over in GCP. Focus on understanding fundamentally what those tools are built to do, and making sure that it's the right tool for the problem you're trying to solve. Because in a lot of cases, we come across customers who think, okay, we're using the example I like to use is Kubernetes. Kubernetes is an awesome technology. It's very highly scalable, very again, to go back to the Lego analogy, you can build all kinds of really great things on top of it, but it might not be the best thing to run your WordPress blog on, right? And likewise, Redshift or Macy or any combination of these tools might not be the right one for the specific task you're trying to execute. So I would caution, read through the documentation, maybe reach out to, if you're working with an account manager or someone on a particular cloud, see what resources are there to better understand the tools you're actually using and make sure it's a good fit for your problem.
Mm-hmm. I know as part of your service offering, you'll do some pretty comprehensive security vulnerability kind of assessments. How often do you get the nod from the chief data officer or data professional organizations to come in and assess their cloud environment around their data warehouse and data analytics ecosystem?
It's certainly not uncommon. In a lot of cases, the data officers are sometimes the most aware of compliance issues or potential risks, and definitely come to us on occasion to help them out from their perspective, and then eventually we get embedded with the engineering teams and maybe the sysadmins to help them shore up the foundation, as it were. Alexandria, I think you might have had more experience in this in dealing directly with data offices.
Not so much on the data offices side. I tangentially know a little bit about the data side of things just because my boyfriend actually works in data science. So I hear kind of the other side of it a little bit, which is actually kind of what made me interested in the security side of it, more so than just my job. Just listening to some of the struggles that he has had and has had to kind of sort through, because it is really, he doesn't work for a very big company. So there's not a lot of, I guess I'll say, support as far as kind of the security side of things goes. So having all of that put on, just the data engineer or data scientist is a lot, right? It's definitely not their forte like it is mine or Aaron's. And so they have to spend a lot of time going through and making sure that they do read the documentation, like Aaron mentioned, so that they can even configure things properly.
Mm-hmm. I mean, my goodness, why not have hundreds and hundreds of data security professionals available to you through your cloud providers? And I still have a lot of large enterprises, especially in certain industries. Healthcare is starting to warm up to cloud-based solutioning, but still, in financial services and in many cases telco, very, very adverse to cloud because of security concerns. Can either of you comment on that? Is this a red herring or is it a valid concern? Or is it both?
Well, I think it's just a matter of not knowing what you don't know in some cases. And of course, healthcare, fintech, banks and such, they're all going to be very risk averse, right? And rightfully so. Especially with the types of breaches we've seen in the last decade. But ultimately, the most successful teams we've worked with seem to find a footing somewhere, and as we guide them into a better understanding of what the cloud actually means and how to use it, and from there we start as a group to see where it better fits and maybe where it doesn't. There's obviously some places where either your risk profile or your financial profile is just not amenable to running certain things in the cloud. In that case, of course, stay on-prem, stay with whatever solution fits those profiles. But oftentimes it's just a matter of gaining a better understanding of what's actually out there and how to use it, and then the blocks start to fall into place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. And some of the services that are available, are there access logs or things of that sort that you can constantly monitor or even start to put some triggers on to give you a heads up that people are attempting to go around the access controls that are in place?
Absolutely. And we could even do an entire other series of podcasts on just observability and where it would relate to data and how you would actually take the plethora of signals you could potentially program into your cloud environment and then just manage and analyze all those. In fact, AWS just announced a preview of a service that they call their security data lake, right? An entire data lake dedicated specifically to security observability in AWS, and also that works with a really interesting new open source initiative called the Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework, which is going to be kind of a lingua franca or aims to be kind of a lingua franca between all the different security vendors and the clouds and stuff, so that you can really start to interoperate some of these tools and get actionable data from the different sources all into one place, rather than having to have a pager over here and then an alert over here and an email somewhere else. It all can kind of feed into one place, be it AWS or be it another vendor, and you can actually kind of really move towards that single pane of glass.
Yeah. And so does it abstract all the bits and nibbles that come off of the different disparate security platforms?
Essentially, yeah, it's a common schema that says, hey, if you're looking at a CPU usage reading over here, or a firewall traffic monitor over here, this is the way you translate it into a common schema so that everyone can read it. That's the same way.
Security has so many nuances to it. What level of engineering do we need to put into this whole security framework?
Well, that's the great thing. A lot of the cloud providers realize that that things can be very complex at taken from a 30,000-foot view. So they've come up with various frameworks and white papers on working through the more common use cases, or a base use case. And then obviously, there's plenty of professionals out there who can help guide you above and beyond just that simple use case. But a lot of times, and I like to repeat this quite a bit, simple is fast and fast, or sorry, simple is secure and secure is important. Security is important. So to butcher a quote from a movie, but overall, if you feel like things are getting too complex and out of hand, go back to first principles, go back to the simplest thing you can find, the documentation, and work from there. Because it's likely the simpler you keep it, the closer to being secure you'll be.
I see we talked about AWS and GCP, and two of the clouds that we're most familiar with as well. They have got just wealth of documentation. Are there vehicles to have access to the security professionals to get guidance from the cloud providers, where you can get some office hours from them, or what's your experience there?
Certainly, there's definitely professional services offerings from most of the major clouds, and of course third parties like us.
Yeah, sure.
In general, it's going to be mostly static documentation until you start engaging with your account manager on any individual platform. But yes, there's definitely paths to escalation in that sense.
Yeah, and of course you guys are a great conduit for that, right? Because it's like, how do I get the attention of GCP, right? I got a specific security question. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about the fact that there is just tons and tons and tons of data that people are starting to realize are of value to them. Internal data that they've never tapped into before. I mentioned IoT oriented data, sensor kind of data that's just been sitting around getting generated and not used, but also syndicated data and third-party data and data marketplaces and whatnot. So as we're bringing on more and more and more data, I mean, what do we track? What do we log?
Alexandria, I'll let you start with this one if you like.
I would say as far as a baseline of logging, like API calls are good, access to the data, anyone who accesses it so that you can, like that data lineage that Aaron mentioned earlier, if you have too many people accessing the data, then you can't necessarily prove its integrity any longer. So logging who has access to it and where from, when they access it and what they do to it. A lot of times that can get to be a lot. You end up with alert fatigue and then you just kind of ignore everything, which you don't want.
Right.
So making sure that you use that data and then set alarms on, you know, hey, this looks weird, or this has happened too many times, where it will let you know when something isn't the norm, I think is the best way to go about it.
Aaron, you got anything to add to that? I've got a follow-on question or observation.
No,
maybe. Yeah.
Let's go on to your follow-on.
Yeah. So I've been very keen on helping companies realize the potential value of using more and more machine learning algorithms against the data products that we build. So, you know, going beyond just visualizations, but really starting to mine that data, looking for those combinations of attributes that can predict a particular outcome. From what I'm seeing, the regulatory agencies are also starting to lean in on the use of data, especially as it relates to feeding machine learning algorithms and artificial intelligence algorithms. I guess my point is it's going beyond who's accessing data, but it's also around what are they doing with it? Are you starting to get, are you seeing that kind of groundswell when you're getting asked to help companies understand the whole landscape of regulatory requirements, not only those that are in place like GDPR and CCPA, and I think Colorado's is CPA, but there's regulatory bills that are on the table around algorithmic accountability. Are you seeing any kind of pickup from organizations around asking you to assist with that as well?
I don't know that we've really started seeing that yet. I think it's really coming into the zeitgeist, especially in the last, say few weeks, even to a couple of months with ChatGPT and Google back over the summer, GitHub Copilot and such. And I think honestly right now it's kind of the wild west. I don't think legislatively we're quite prepared for the explosion of AI that I expect we'll see in the next 18 to 24 months, and the new uses. Alexandria, I don't know if you have any comment on it. I'm just amazed at how commonplace it's become in the last, like I said, the last few weeks to talk about, AI is generating art, AI is generating, visual art, written art, music, code, even.
Yeah, I haven't encountered anything as far as kind of the security side of it goes, but I do think it will be something that will continue to grow kind of exponentially over the next little bit here, because like you said, it's definitely taken off.
Yeah, so that implies then the accountability is on the conscious enterprise, right? It's like, I know it's coming, how do I get ahead of it? And, so what would be some of the fundamental blocking and tackling that you can recommend? We started talking about logging, not only access controls, but what are the kind of logging or telemetry should companies be considering as it relates to the consumption of the data?
Just in general, your code operations. You obviously want to know where the data is coming from, and I would assume with, for instance, CCPA or CPA and et cetera, you'll need some sort of record of release for that data. Did the individual opt in or opt out when that data was collected? what are the ramifications of that? And what are the kind of privacy implications? Is the data, identifiable in the classic sense of, name, address, phone number? Is it identifiable in the inference or the inferable sense, as in there's been a lot of work done around statistically correlating what we would consider randomized data to actual people, and apparently it's a little bit easier than we originally thought mathematically. So it's a complicated subject at this point. But in terms of what you can do proactively from a foundational standpoint in the cloud, obviously make sure you know where it came from, make sure you know where you're putting it, and make sure you know who can change it and or delete it, and when you need to delete it.
Yeah, back to that data product lifecycle. I hope people are really taking note on that. All right, so a lot of logging around the consumption of data and by whom, for what reason, et cetera, and does it tie back to the intended policies. Let's get on to our fifth tenet. We talked about a lot of the fundamentals here. So what, if you could summarize, give me a feel for the fifth tenet that you propose or are proponents of.
Yeah, so no one size fits all. Depending on what you're using the data for, what kind of company you are, how big you are, all kinds of things like that. You can set things up in a way that works best and makes sense for your business use case and still keep it secure. But that doesn't necessarily look the same for a small 5-person company as it would for, say, a giant healthcare company. So making sure that you right size what your security looks like and the tools that you use for it will help things stay secure. Like Aaron said, simple is secure, and will also, in the long run, probably save you money.
Yeah, that's, it kind of triggered a thought in my head, is everybody's got to really, take to heart the need to be in compliance, whether you're small or large. Of course, large companies have deeper pockets. And maybe they can absorb the legacy events that take place where they get hit with a $30 million fine, but a small company that's generating $10 million in revenue, they're equally at risk, aren't they?
Absolutely. I don't mean to discard the security statements that we made before, but they might look different as far as how they're implemented. So the tools that are used might look different. The data that's kept might look a little bit different. The life cycle might look different depending on what type of company you are or what you're using it for. Just the different use cases can have different, configurations.
And large enterprises, I mean, there's a lot of heaviness, right? I mean, I've got a huge center of gravity sitting here, and now I'm reactively realizing, oh my gosh, I've got vulnerability. Is it fair to say that young startups that are blazing the trail, is it easier for them to implement security at the ground level?
They're definitely a lot more agile. I think it depends on if they have that security mindset to start with. I will say kind of one of the things that I was talking or that I was listening to you guys talk about as far as companies moving to the cloud and some companies just refusing to do so. I've worked with a bunch of different banks, and some of them, it's kind of like trying to turn the Titanic, right? So it's massive. It takes a really long time, and you have to get everyone on board to be able to do it, right? But the smaller companies, like you mentioned, the startups, those can make decisions and make moves very quickly. So it looks a lot simpler for them to actually make that change.
Yeah, that would be my premise as well. Wouldn't it be great to just build security in intentionally by design from the very beginning?
Yeah, start secure.
Which back to the earlier comment you made, Alexandria, the smaller companies, you got data engineers trying to wear a CISO hat. I mean, where do they go to get that kind of assistance?
Us.
Yeah, right. Okay, I didn't mean that to be a shameless plug for ScaleSec, but it worked out that way. Which really, I did, that implies that, there's no really company footprint that is, can abdicate their responsibility for security access control around their data products.
No, but it's for everyone. I think that everyone should have at least kind of like a basic knowledge of security. That would make things a lot easier. Obviously, there are companies like ScaleSec, and there's people like me and Aaron who will happily talk about security all day long, every day. So as long as people take advantage of that and try to learn along the way, I think it'll all end up okay.
Awesome. So as we're coming, we're hit the bottom of the hour. Kaylee, not seeing much chatter out there. I don't know if anybody in the audience wants to share some observations or insights. I'm prompting you to do so.
Yep, this is a perfect time to share some questions. You can add it into the chat or in the Q&A if you have any. And we have some calls to action as well in the meanwhile.
Let's hear about those. Yeah.
Well, I know ScaleSec has a pretty robust blog that is kicking around, so I'm going to share a link to that. This is blog insights about cloud security and from compliance experts. Let me get that in the chat. You can hit that right here for everybody. And then, of course, you can check out scalesec.com /services if you want to see the different ways that these experts can help.
Sure. Can you share a little bit around the service offerings that you have, Alexandria and Aaron?
Sure. So myself particularly, I'm come from a bit of an engineering background, and we always like to sink our teeth into kind of the DevOpsy side of things. So we focus a lot of time and effort around helping teams transition to the cloud in an automated fashion, because really once you get going and up to scale, it's really hard to do what we call click ops, which is, okay, I'm just going to mouse around in the cloud console and craft everything by hand. Not only from an operational standpoint, but from a security and compliance standpoint, that becomes really hard to scale really fast. So focuses on automation and pipelining, just like you would with maybe your ETL or other ML and AI jobs. We have an offering around the growing privacy space. You mentioned some of the laws earlier that we'd be able to help guide and grow understanding around. And then we're also, I think we're also trying to work on expanding into ML and AI and more of a data ops perspective. As the industry grows and as we see today, it's becoming much more relevant.
Yeah, I could see your influence around. You mentioned data observability earlier. That's a big buzz right now in the data warehousing, data analytics space, and everybody's we're going to, oh my gosh, we got these complex data pipelines that are extracting data and transforming the snot out of it and then refactoring it and then pushing it off into multiple targets. But there's no ongoing inline validation looking for anomalies in the data. Is there drift going on? Is there unreasonable things coming across? I would imagine you can weigh in a little bit from a security perspective on the kinds of things that should be in that data observability sublayer, if you will.
Sure. A lot of the things we can capture are anomalies in either the computation or the modification of things. We rely a lot on hashing when it's feasible for the data set. Let me think. Alexandria, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that is kind of what we focus on, is just the like you mentioned, the change and making sure that is either alerted on or at least brought to somebody's attention.
Mhm. I wonder if anybody's thinking around the corollary kind of analysis. It's probably more of a correlation than a causation, but if I've got this single pane of glass around security-oriented events, and I got another single pane of glass around the observability of the quality and the content of data, is anybody starting to try to interweave those and say, ooh, looks like we're seeing a spike in security activity, and all of a sudden I'm seeing this spike in data observability alerts.
Yeah, I think that's one of the more cutting edge spaces is correlating both the traditional perimeter security to what is the actual integrity of the data. And there's definitely tried and true methods of managing that on a server to server basis, but I think some of the tools are still catching up in terms of being able to correlate the two at the scale that you can get to in the cloud. And so I'll say maybe watch this space. Hopefully that we can catch up as an industry.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, a question came across that it kind of dovetails to that, Aaron. I'll read it to you. As mentioned already, most quote data people aren't very security aware, and frankly, many times don't care. Right? How can you make the need for data security interesting or compelling to them?
Sure. Well, I think a healthy dose of automation ought to be able to spark the interest of just about any engineer I've ever met. Showing that path of how, hey, we can reduce some of the toil, to quote the SRE handbook, that you as a data engineer might have to go through, just by tweaking a few, plugging a few services together, and giving you more time to either refine the data as it's coming in, which I know is a big pain point in a lot of pipelines, or be able to spend more time on the back end, guarding the insights and designing more experiments to actually use the data on. Automation ultimately is going to be the driver behind finding that extra time and that extra capability. And that's really what we focus on, is not so much, okay, we're going to replace everybody with robots, but where can we really put the machines to work in places that humans either are overqualified for or inefficient at, in terms of sure, I can lift a box and put it on a shelf, but I am not very good at writing bits to a disk.
Right. So we can get them somewhat interested, but even if that doesn't pique their interest, what are some of the ways that we can get them motivated to take security serious?
Certainly, I fall back on observability. If we can tighten that feedback loop between the services they're using and the feedback of, hey, this is either insecure or this is a data risk, and this is, seeing the whole picture of, hey, if we just throw this up here in a bucket and we're not worried about the permissions to beat the dead horse of the leaky bucket, then this is quickly what could happen. You could do some chaos engineering, you could do some chaos security engineering, which is a new buzzword I heard a couple of weeks ago at a talk, to kind of reinforce that, hey, this kind of behavior is risky, and the remediation of it, or the proactive steps to prevent it, are actually really simple, in terms of just, here, use this infrastructure as code that we have in our infrastructure as code catalog, which, by the way, is probably a good idea, a good place to start from, just like you would with a data catalog or a data mart in a warehouse. As security practitioners, we can help you design and tweak and provide those to your data engineers, your individuals using the data, so that they can more easily and like not really have to think about doing the security so much as just doing their data work with the tools that we can provide.
I love that. Go ahead, Alexandria, please.
So I kind of add something else to that. I think that's also kind of a people problem, right? So like, if you change the culture of your company to be more security focused, so that it's something that you talk about, it's something that you focus on, it's something that is reviewed and is really a focal point, then obviously the people who work for a company are going to have at least somewhat more of an interest around it.
Yeah, so that feels like it starts from the top.
Yeah, there's been a phrase, shift security left, that's really taken hold over the past few years. And the crux of it is get people thinking about security early and more often, rather than it being kind of the guy who shows up later and says, hey, you're insecure. If you start thinking about it from the beginning, there's a whole lot less friction.
I love that. Yep. Intentional design. Yeah. Awesome. Well, what a great dialogue. Enlightening for me. I'm going to go look into this chaos theory.
This was
All right,
awesome, guys. Yeah, thank you so much for your time today and for shedding some very necessary light, especially as we go into the new year. The links to the blog at scalesec.com, as well as the services are in the chat. I'm dropping a link in right now for our Great Data Minds LinkedIn group in 2023. This is where a lot of our conversation is really going to be shaping up to take place. So make sure that you request to join that group if you haven't already. And we are just so thankful that you spent some time with us today. This will be recorded, of course, and posted out, so you can access it later on YouTube or any of our social channels or on our website. And in closing, I would like to say very happy holidays to everybody. And thank you. I see some familiar names on the attendee list here. And I know some of you come to a lot of the events that we have. And so we're very thankful to have you with us. Happy holidays, everybody.
Ho, ho, ho.
Happy holidays. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.